Go straight to the panel now and ask them to speak a little about some of the things that you shared, but also their own reflections on how bad it is in the GTA. And so I'm gonna ask Emily to speak first, and then I'm gonna pass it around.
I think it's far worse than we realize, because I think we spend a lot of time trying to make it go away and to pretend that we don't have poverty and homelessness. A comment over here about, well, we're all professional and middle class and we live in Mississauga. I think that was the great dream, and I think that's what we strive for, which makes poverty for a citizen of Mississauga even worse. I think there's a certain amount of shame and failure. In addition to that, the loss of your material status, you really do feel that there's something wrong with you. You must be lazy. My stereotype from what I had learned as I grew up was that in a country like Canada, where everything is wonderful, only the very lazy and very ignorant and those folks who really didn't want any better life were the ones that landed up on the streets. So I had to deal with that, because I knew myself, in myself, I didn't feel that way. But I think because in Peel we're so isolated, it's kind of a personal tragedy, and you wouldn't share that with anybody. In Toronto it's different, because there is a community of poverty, and you talk to your fellow homeless people and you realize that they're okay, they're good people going through a bad time, and it helps you to understand that maybe you're a good person going through a bad time also.
From my experience doing Project Downtown, just in reference to that this is a problem that the government fixes and then you can get back on your feet. Like, I've seen people who are on the street since we started. And we started Project Downtown in 2007, and we see these people every week, like up till yesterday. So this one guy that we know, we've known him quite well now. When he first was on the street, it was because he did construction work, and he had injured his leg. And because he was injured, he wasn't able to continue working. And I remember that winter, he was one of the ones who would stay out every single night, no matter how cold it was. And it was a cold winter that winter. And he would show us like how his leg was improving over time. And he'd walk a couple steps, and like we'd kind of cheer him on. And then for about a year and a half, we didn't see him. And we were wondering, like, where did he go? What happened to him? And then we heard one of our friends, like, I think I saw him, and he was in a wheelchair. And he had lost, like, it looked like he had lost both legs. I'm like, what are you talking about? How's that possible? Because there was only one leg that was even injured. And subhanAllah, that's what happened. He had actually, we met him on the street, and we still meet him until today. And he had lost both legs. I imagine part of it might have been because he was on the street and through frostbite. And up till now, this is 5 years later, he's still there every single day. I know, like, we know where to find him. One of the aunties who comes to do Project Downtown with us, her son also gives him food on every Sunday, because we just know where he is. And we know him so well, we know his preferences, we know which fruits he likes and which ones he doesn't. And we try to accommodate our food packages for his taste. And the other thing I wanted to mention is about the more invisible poverty. I recently got back in touch with a family that I had known from a long time ago, and subhanAllah, like, they live in Mississauga, and this family, like, 3 out of the 5 members of the family, they have jobs, and they struggle. They struggle to the point that they will fast because there's not enough food. And like, these are people that you see in the masjids. And I had no idea. I had no idea this is their situation. And it's just like how are we going to be questioned when we live beside these people and we have more than enough? Yeah. And that's part of, that's a big part of what motivates us to do this sort of thing.
A few comments. First of all, I think, hearing Emily put it the way she did, a community of poverty, that is something really, it's really strong when you hear about something being put like that. Now, in spite of the invisibility of poverty in Mississauga, what we know is that out of the total population of roughly 750,000 people, 17% of Mississauga lives below the poverty line. So that's 125,000 people in Mississauga live below the poverty line. The Mississauga Food Bank itself serves about 38,000 people. Increase the volume here just a little bit. The Mississauga Food Bank itself serves about 38,000 people through its different agency organizations. So as invisible as it does exist. There's a couple of things that I want us to think about, right? That one of the defense mechanisms in our brains, I guess, to maintain sanity, is that we convince ourselves of certain questionable facts, just so that we don't have to deal with the reality of the opposite, just so that we don't have to be overrun by guilt. We convince ourselves of the fact that certain people are the way they are out of their choice, because then we don't have to deal with the consequence that comes. Maybe they're not there out of their own choice. Maybe they were there because this is, they were forced into a certain set of circumstances, right? Now, but if we convince ourselves that it's their fault that they are the way they are, it becomes easier on our conscience. We can just sleep easier at night. Also, this idea of the government being the solution. Now, I am not a right-wing person. All the power to the left. But the thing is, the reality is, though, I mean, the fact does remain that the more we externalize solutions to our problems, the more pervasive our powerlessness is, the more pervasive problems are. The more we keep saying somebody else can fix it, or somebody else is like, oh, it's only somebody else besides me who's capable of fixing it, the more I'm convincing myself not to do anything. I mean, this, every community has this. We have certain scapegoats for whatever problems are in our community, right? We have, certain, so-and-so organization is conspiring against us, so-and-so people are sabotaging our success, so-and-so and this, and so-and-so is that. And so it comes down to poverty as well. The government is causing this. The government is creating it. The government should be fixing it. No, I should be fixing it. You should be fixing it. Every single one of us should be fixing it. The most famous homeless person who ever lived, who every single person in this room loves. Do we know the name? Jesus. Homeless by choice. The most famous homeless person who ever lived. Homeless by choice, right? We wouldn't think twice about giving him any money. But when it comes down to it, we don't say somebody else should have been taking care of him. Well, somebody else is. But the thing is, the more we keep externalizing solutions, the more pervasive our problems become, and the longer it is that they remain unfixed. Sawitri mentioned people who are fasting out of necessity just because they don't have enough food to eat. I mean, we all know of the prophetic hadith, the prophetic narration that he's not a believer who goes to hungry while his neighbor is, who goes to bed with a full belly while his neighbor is hungry. The thing we have to ask ourselves is, how do we know that our neighbor is hungry? Our neighbors are not going to come and tell us. And as most lives are led in suburbia, they are very insular existences. You barely know the first name of the guy living next to you, let alone the guy living five doors down. Like, how do we, the Prophet, he was very clear on who a neighbor is. 40 houses this way, 40 houses that way, 40 houses this way, 40 houses this way, right? How do we know our neighbor is hungry? And if almost 20%, almost like 1 in 5 people in Mississauga is living below the poverty line, chances are somebody in this room is living below the poverty line. You don't know it, but how is it not your fault that you don't know it? How is it not my fault that I don't know it? Right? Unless I take ownership of that, I can't change it. That's it. Jazakumullah.
Okay. Since my job is to be the bad guy, I hear what you're saying, but in everything that has been said so far about how bad it isn't the Horn of Africa. It isn't starvation. It isn't children dying of malnutrition. So why must we do anything? And I want to open this up to the floor. I want the floor to respond to this first. Why must we do anything? Why must we do anything locally as opposed to globally? So
I think maybe to answer that question, why must we do something locally? I think the problems that you talked about, for example, in the Horn of Africa, are sort of a bigger scaled up version of the result of our lifestyles. And so it's kind of like, we all know there's like pollution, right? Like we all know there's these rivers filled with toxic sludge, but we don't see that in our homes. But I see garbage in my home, and I guess the garbage in my home isn't really that big. It's not really that messy, but I see it. But it's like a small example of when you take a lot of people's garbage and explode it further downstream where we don't really see it. That's what it looks like. And I think that maybe it's like the problems out there that are really, really far. It's kind of like an extension of, it's like the result of our lifestyles, and ultimately, like the rest of the world is really serving us in many ways, and there lies, I think, the solution. It's like, well, it's my lifestyle. It's the fact that I want an iPad 3 is causing a lot of suffering and pain in the world. I don't know, it's something to think about. So,
if you look at the situation here in Canada, the UN is not going to come and set up a refugee camp to help the poor in Canada. We have to take care of our own people before we take care of other people. If my brother's on the street, my neighbor's on the street, I want to help them both, but I'm going to help my brother first, and then I'm going to help the neighbor.
One of the big problems we have is that with capitalism, we generate massive amounts of wealth, but we can't distribute. So just from that rational angle, we have wealth going to the very few, the very educated, but the very vulnerable don't have it. Yet at the same time, we're creating a lot of hate for that vulnerability. So we have to spread the wealth around quite literally, because they're not able to generate themselves. And just from an emotional side of it, so that's the rational side. You have to have it. You have to build your own community, because mass poverty just makes the whole community just go to dirt. I'll hurry this up. But at the same time, the reason why you need to go local is it just sucks to have people around you starving and they can't do anything about it. You can't solve the problems of the world, but if you can solve what's happening next door, you should be able to do that. So yeah, so it's just one of those things. To summarize, it's just spread the wealth around, and capitalism makes it so that a lot of people will go homeless, so we have to fix it. And at the same time, since we can't fix the underlying causes of it, we can at least help with the symptoms so that we could come up with a solution later on. Because the big problem is we don't throw enough money at the problems that generate homelessness, but we can at least help with the solutions until then.
One of the participants would like to mention that there is a simple low-cost solution. We should move out of our comfort zone and talk to people on the street. Try to help them by asking if they know someone who needs assistance.
I would just like to say, the thing with the Horn of Africa is that, in places that are abroad, you see the ads where $20 a week of your money could do so much for so many people, whereas here $20 feeds a couple of people or a couple of families maybe, So at least the way I rationalize myself is okay, here, if I'm here, I'll try my best to go to a soup kitchen, volunteer myself because I'm here. And my money goes outside because it seems to make a bigger impact on people's lives. But at the same time, religiously, yes, we are responsible for our community first, and this is where we're living. So, we are, and it's tough to find a balance. I don't know, there's no real answer to it, right? And we all have things that are closer to our heart, for example, like I'm from Pakistan. So the people that, I would want to help out people there just because I have an emotional connection with that. So we all have to kind of, find a balance and keep our religion in mind. Make sure that this is our community. We're here, at least volunteer a few hours of your time. What they're doing, handing out these packets, isn't that, the money is here and there are people to give it. So the least we can do is volunteer our time at least.
I think we also have to realize that this problem is not that far from us. We ourselves are probably 3 paychecks away from being in the same situation. If someone was to get hurt in your family and maybe their job doesn't cover the disability, you could be there tomorrow, right? So when you think about it that way, alhamdulillah, I've been very blessed in my life that I've worked in places where I've had good disability benefits, but I've been in a situation where I was out of work for 8 weeks. And I really appreciated that my work did take care of me at that time. But I also know a lot of people would not have been in my situation where they were still covered, in terms of being paid. And so, okay, alhamdulillah, I'm taken care of. But what about if I wasn't married and my husband wasn't working? Or, okay, let's say someone gets divorced. What if someone is, physically abused and they have to leave a situation? And now they don't have the income to take care of their family, and they have to choose between their physical safety and their food. It's, so when you start looking at it from a very, up close perspective, you have to start thinking about the people who are around you and who may be going through those things. Alhamdulillah, I've seen things that made me wake up. Alhamdulillah, I've worked in a food bank, and the people who come in, they're everyday people. They're the people who are shopping in no frills next to you.
Sorry, Homa, could you mention the food bank that's nearby? The one
the Eden Community Food Bank is at Unity and Ridgeway. They are the local food bank for this area. How the Mississauga Food Bank works is that they are a distribution center, and then they have agency food banks that you go to depending on what postal code you're in. So if anyone is in need, you can go to the food bank. They have you can go on Tuesdays in the day, or in the evening on Tuesday, or in the day on Thursday, and you can go there, and then they'll determine whether or not you're qualified to, receive the food, and then you can come every week to pick that. I think you can get 7 to 10 days worth of food once a month. So you go in, I think, once a month, and then you can pick the food. But there are a lot of resources in Mississauga for people who don't have enough food. And I think one of the key things that we can do, at the minimum, is know about them. So should we find out about someone in any need, we can tell them about it. There's the Muslim Welfare Center, there's ISNA Food Bank, and then there's the Mississauga Food Bank System. And I'm sure there's many, many more. A lot of churches, synagogues, and all of these places do not discriminate. So, at the minimum, we should know what they are and what they do, and so that at least we can refer people if they need it. Oh, sorry, can I say anything? About government solving all the world's problems, not going to happen. To qualify for Ontario Works, you have to go through a long process. To qualify for ODSP, there's a long process. The people who are in the food banks do not come close to qualifying. So you have to be in a really, really bad state to get the government's help. It can't be just, someone who is able to pay the rent but can't afford food. You have to be in a really bad state. So the government is only going to be helping people who are, in a far worse state than a lot of the people that you're seeing in the food banks.
But what's what's the worst state possible? I mean, is it someone who is ill, who has an illness?
Sorry, could you use the microphone?
So what's a really bad state? Someone who has an illness and a degree, for example? Is it someone, do they discriminate between who gets the help or not? Is it someone who is educated
No.
and lost it, or
It's you qualify for Ontario Works, I believe, based on your income only. Like if you have a low income, which is well below the poverty line, ODSP, they look at your disability as well as your income. So, but the people, like this is the thing, is when we talk about hunger, often we associate that with homelessness. But they're two separate issues. There are people with homes. There are people, you know, with children who are sending them to school hungry in the morning. They have a home, they have a car, they just can't afford to pay all these things. There's something on the internet, I can't remember the name, but it says, why don't you calculate your life and how much it costs to do it? Have you done that?
I did that.
Do the math, I think it's called. And if you do the math, it is not easy to survive in this society.
I think the other really bad part of hunger is that because of the vulnerability it creates, it has just bad literally for the health of the society. When you have a lot of people who are very hungry, they don't necessarily get the most nutritious food, and then they're preyed on by fast food corporations that just sell easy and cheap. Because obviously if you're working two really low paying jobs, you don't have time to cook, you're gonna go to McDonald's, and then that just creates bad long-term consequences for the society. So then at the same time you have the actual health of the society, not just morally, but physically just starts to deteriorate. So that's why when we were talking about the Horn of Africa, we can't fix that, but this we can fix.
Assalamu alaikum. So my comment's kind of taking this in a different direction. I was thinking, when we help people, it's not just, like you said, it's not just them that's getting the help. We're actually getting help, we're getting more benefit when we do this ourselves. So I'm thinking about this, when we help people abroad, and we're sending whatever, $20, $30, $40, $50, $100, let's say even monthly or on a regular basis. The benefit that's going there is, okay, I'm feeling a little less in my budget, and they're getting benefit, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the actual benefit. But when I help someone here and I'm doing it like I'm actually being involved in the process of helping someone out, this is actually helping me feel it. Like, I think that there's a hadith where Prophet ﷺ says that if someone has a hard heart, he has to, I think, touch an orphan's head or something to that effect, and then it extends. So I'm saying basically that when I help someone and I see that person, it affects me, and in turn that probably also affects who I am in the future. I'll probably help more people out if I get a direct experience with helping more people who I see on a daily basis. So if we think about this in terms of a society, so let's say that everyone in this room starts helping out people who they see on a daily basis, then probably, I mean, in the future, all of us will be affected in ways that we wouldn't have been affected had we not helped people in front of us.
There's two things. One is the stereotype of the poor as being insane and on drugs. First off, I'm going to say that's false, but so what if it is? They're on drugs, don't they still need food? They have mental issues, they're struggling with schizophrenia or whatever. Don't they still need food? Aren't they still human? We have to take care of them no matter what their problems are. If society keeps kicking them down again and again and again, how are they ever going to stand back up? Then the next one is the invisibility of the poor, like the people, you don't know if they're coming to your house to visit you or they're coming to your house because they know they're going to eat. They need their privacy. Let them, feed them, don't ask questions.
So I just wanted to answer the question of why we should do anything at all. Us here, a small group of Muslims in the KW area, got together and we went to a soup kitchen. And I was speaking to one of the women there that was in charge. It was in a church, and they had a joint clinic. She took me to speak to one of the patients, and he said he had a severe depression, and after a few days he was in a hospital, a GRT. They kicked him out. Literally, they had him get out from the back door. And if it wasn't for the fact that this woman had found him, he would have committed suicide. So I think that's why we have to personally go out and like connect with people, not just think that it's a like giving out money, that's not enough. We have to connect with the hearts.
Okay, so I'm gonna then move the discussion on, because we've looked at, you know, how bad the issue is, and we've looked at the reasons why we should be doing stuff. But the question is, what are we doing? Like, what are everybody in this room? What are we actually doing? And so now's the point I'm going to ask you to reflect. I'm going to ask you to take 5 minutes. Again, you can do this individually, you can do this in pairs, you can do this in groups. But I want you to think about, what have you done in the last week, in the last month, or in the last 6 months to deal with some of the vulnerability, poverty, homelessness, etc. that's around you? And then if any of you are brave enough, I'd like to share it. Because I'd particularly also like to reflect on what's worked. We're all saying we should help, but what have we done to help? So I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes and reflect on that, please, and then please do share what's worked.
Sorry, one point needs to be made before that. I don't think anybody over here should be walking up or will walk away with this, but I thought it's worth mentioning. We're not saying don't help anybody out in the Horn of Africa. I think the point that is crucial to be made here is, don't continue to ignore charity that is, don't continue to ignore a need that is around you, just because a need somewhere else is more prominently marketed, or a need somewhere else seems more glamorous. That's it.
Okay, a few minutes please, and then I'll pull you back, inshallah. Okay, quick poll. Quick poll. Hands up if you think you've done enough. Okay, good. That's a start. So I'm not going to ask how much you've done. Considering nobody said they've done enough, I'm definitely not going to ask how much you've done. What I am going to ask is what's worked. So of the things that have been done by the people in this room, do you have examples of what's worked that you can share with everybody else?
So one thing that was really, like, I think it would have an effect if I would do this more often, but I was walking down Young Street a few months ago, and I saw this man. His name is Todd. He's one of the nicest people I've met. He's homeless, and I actually had dinner with him. We went to a restaurant and we had dinner, and the reason I'm saying why this worked is because, I mean, it left an impression on me, and I think that if I do this more often, I was talking here, and we were saying that basically one of the main problems is we've become numb to the problem. I walk down the street and I'm numb. I don't feel the pain when I see people. So I'm thinking, so my first step would be, if I can get more empathy, once I walk down the street, I see people and I feel their pain, then that would be the first step that might eventually cause me to, later on in my life, spend much more money, much more time, much more effort to solve the problem. So starting point would be to get more empathy, so have dinner, and it goes from there.
Can I make a quick point about something like that before we move on? Either microphone would be nice.
I wasn't hinting.
I'm glad you weren't. Just something really quickly that I wanted to share with everybody here that definitely benefit. The reason I'm mentioning it now is because I think that's like a foundation upon which, you know, all these acts can follow. And it was certainly a foundation for me. We were in 1998. We were in Morocco with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf for about a month for the rihla, and I heard Sheikh Hamza mention the story much later, that he was with somebody else, and they were passing somebody on the street, and this man was clearly begging for money. He wasn't all there. for whatever reason, he wasn't all there. Whether he was inebriated or, Allahu Akbar, he wasn't all there. So he was begging for money, and so as they were passing, he asked them for money. And so one of the people who was in the party reached into his pocket to give. And another person in that party said, "What are you doing? Don't do that. Look, that's all he's going to do." And he pointed at an empty bottle of alcohol next to him. He said, "He's just going to go and get more of that." So the beggar, he looked at that bottle and he just said, "A'udhu billah." Like, I seek Allah's protection from this filth, right? He says that, "A'udhu billah," right? Now, whether he was lying or whether he wasn't is irrelevant. Because what Sheikh Hamza pointed out at that moment was, it is at that moment that we confronted the bad opinion that we had about this person in our hearts. Right? That we had presumed certain realities about him that we have no way of knowing whether they were true or not. That we had a bad opinion of this person, right? So the basic underlying factor is have a good opinion of people. And that was a message that really, helped me in whatever little I do. And then there's also the story of Sayyidah Aisha. Whenever she would give money out to the poor, she would perfume the coins. And they asked why she was doing that. It's because she didn't even see the poor people that she was giving to, right? She said, "This is going in the hand of God, right? I'm giving this to God." So, just understanding those realities, that really helped me.
So it's basically the same idea. Once you get to know the people, it's easier to take time out and put some effort into helping them. Like they're having dinner, or you're having a meal with people, and how he went out and took someone out for dinner. I myself, last Ramadan, was in Sudan, and we were distributing food to break the fast. And we actually went and helped people out, and we sat down with them, and we broke bread with them to break our fast. But most of the people volunteering to go and distribute all this food all over the capital of Khartoum, they weren't people who had anything. They were people who had nothing. So even the volunteers had nothing. And that was just, for me, it was an awakening, like a moment that I just woke up and I thought, the people who had the money, who had the time, who had everything, weren't even out in the streets helping. And Emily even mentioned how the community, the homeless community, they would break bread with each other. These are the people who are actually helping each other. So my idea would be to get a group of people, and even my experience in high school, going downtown to the shelters and meeting the people and speaking to them and learning about their life stories, that stayed with me until now. So I think we need to break that barrier and allow people, groups to come together, meet together, and get to know each other. Whether it's people downtown in Toronto, whether it's people, when Isna holds its soup kitchen every Saturday, the first Saturday of every month, and the families come in to eat. I mean, we should go there and get to know them, who they are, what their stories are. I think empathy is important. Our Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had a lot of empathy, and that is what made him very caring about others. That's how he felt other people's pain. We need to break that barrier and feel their pain and understand that even if you fast in Ramadan for a few hours, that hunger, that's nothing compared to what some people are going through.
I wanted to share a quick story. I was driving on the freeway once, and I picked up two ladies. Their car had broken down. We took them into town, fed them, got them some gas. That was it. A few months later, they called me, "I need help." I took them out to eat again. We had a story, got them some gas. But one of the ladies, one of them was the same, the second one was different each time. She told me she was so touched by the first time we had met, she began taking homeless people into her home. And she told me about the men, that she had been taking care of because she lived close to a homeless shelter. So you might think it's something small, but it's not small. It's not small to the person you're helping. It is definitely not small in the eyes of God.
I've been we're having a discussion here in our circle, and we realized how little we've done, and I think that's the first step, is admitting, right? Admitting but not taking that step to hold you back though. And as we just pointed out, the smallest of acts make a difference. And I've had just a couple of small experiences recently. One was volunteering with an organization in Toronto called Meals on Wheels. And basically they have a list of folks who can't even, for any number of reasons, can't even leave their residences, but need food delivered to their place. And the really touching part about that experience was that they actually deliver hot meals. So it's not just canned food as most of us know, it's actually hot meals for lunch, right? So you would actually go volunteer and deliver a hot meal to a person in their home, right? And on the point of actually getting to know people, what was really amazing was in the act of doing that, you would have like a description of every case. And so sometimes you would say, please knock very loudly on this door because the person inside is hard of hearing. And then please be patient because the person inside has mobility issues, so they might take a while until they come to the door. Things like that, right? And then they open the door and they have a chat with you, and you get, and just that mere, even if it's a minute, the fact that now you've put a face to the person in need, and just actually you feel it, you feel that you've done something, and that so I thought I'd share that as an example. A bunch of my friends and I recently have been just contemplating that, and one of the things that we've realized is that, especially when you enter the workforce, you become, for some reason, you become like too busy with life. That's the term that we always hear, right? So in school you had your excuse, but at least in school, a lot of us were active in our university clubs and whatnot. But we realized that there is a need for us to kind of always have that flame of wanting to be in touch with the community. And I think one of the things that we've come to realize is we're now looking at different projects where we can give back. And one of the things that we haven't done it yet, so I'm just going to share it as an example, but we haven't done it yet, was the idea that what better way of doing something that actually produces food as well. So the idea of community gardens, starting community gardens, because now you're not only volunteering your time or money, because let's say you need to raise a couple $100 to get some soil and some seeds and things like that, but through that act, by the end of the season, you've actually produced food, right? And I tried this my first time in my own small little backyard in my family's home, and subhanAllah, you don't understand the blessing of the water and the soil and the whole process until you try it. So we planted just a couple of tomato plants, and subhanAllah, in a couple of months you had 50 tomatoes growing in your own backyard, right? And just that, it's unbelievable how detached we are from our natural environment and from seeing food come to life in front of our eyes, and that we're turned into consumers, right? You're supposed to just consume. You're supposed to go work 9 to 5 and then consume your food by purchasing it. But just the mere act of producing it was so powerful. So I've looked, and we saw in Toronto that, especially in Toronto, there's a lot of groups now that are starting community gardens, and you can start it anywhere. You can start it whether it's in your own home, or whether it's in a community center, or even on rooftops and things like that. And there'll be, like I said, the beauty there is you're actually also producing food. So whether you can take it and it's organic, if it's produced by you, etc., etc. So it's really powerful. So I thought I'd share that as an idea as well. So thank you.
I'm conscious of the time, and I'm conscious that we should have closed at 9. So I'm gonna ask the session to be brought to a close, but I'm gonna ask it to be brought to a close with each of our panelists telling us 3 practical things that we can do. And so everybody, for those of us who are wondering, well, okay, maybe I haven't done as much as I should, but I'm not really sure what to do. And we've been given some ideas already because we've shared some ideas ourselves here. But it may not be feasible for you to take somebody to a restaurant because it may not be safe for you to take somebody to a restaurant, for example. But there are always things that we can do. Every single one of us, there are always things that we can do. So I'm going to ask the panelists one by one to give us 3 practical steps that we can do, that we can take away with us, inshallah, and then we'll close with a quick dua. Okay. So
okay, so 3 things. 1, I think we should, when we often say, as part of our greeting, hi, how are you? And sometimes we don't even wait for the answer. It's just how are you, that, as if that's an extension of hi, hi, how are you? And I think it's important to actually ask people how they are. And one of the things that I learned a while back is if how are you always gives you the answer fine, try asking it in a different way. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? I'm an engineer, we like numbers. But just that sort of thing to increase your awareness of how the people around you are doing. You know, if somebody's lost their job, like pretty soon, if they don't get another one, there's a chance that they might really be in need, right? Like, and just to keep testing, you know, asking this way, hopefully not in a very intrusive way, but showing your concern and really asking for an answer of how they're doing. So that's one. Another thing is just to do something, like whatever it is. If you want to give to the Horn of Africa, that's awesome. Just do it. Yeah, I remember one of the speakers at RIS said this quote from the Marines. He says, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Just do something." And then the last thing was just share what you have as much as you can. And one of the things that the other project that we do, that once a month soup kitchen thing, what I really like about it is that one of our rules is that the volunteers have to eat. Well, like once in a while someone's fasting, we don't make them break their fast, but like you're supposed to eat. Like that's part of your volunteering. You eat out there on the tables with everybody else, right? And one of the reasons we decided to do that was there might be a chance that sometime in the future someone might be in a position that they need the food, and they might be shy to come as a customer if you have this division between volunteers and customers. So we didn't want that sort of division. Like everyone is supposed to eat. And alhamdulillah, the idea has spread a little bit in that community center where we've had this program for the past 4 years. They now have another day of the week where they do a similar thing. And part of the philosophy is to remove the stigma of sharing food. Like sharing food is a good thing. Eating food that you didn't necessarily buy yourself is not bad. Like that's fine. Like this is your risk. Sometimes your risk comes from something you purchase, and sometimes it comes from something else, like somebody else purchased.
I would say politically, we all have a voice. We all have the right to that voice. To be kind of dead inside politically or just cast your vote and not think about things is letting down the most vulnerable. So you have that vote, you have that voice. Apparently we live in a democratic society, so use it. It's not acceptable that people live on the streets. That's just, I mean, the Geneva Convention covers that. It's inhumane. And stand up for that. You know, it's wrong that people go hungry. It's wrong that people have a couple of jobs and live in their car. My passion personally is kids. When I see a child going without, and now we see it 2 and 3 generations because the poverty is so entrenched that they don't know what having a good life is all about. And it's real easy to give something to a child. They take it, they don't have all these stereotypes, they don't have all this nonsense going on. So if you know somebody in your community that might be ashamed or embarrassed or feel badly, and they have children, their children are never going to feel badly for a little extra something. And it doesn't have to be food, it can just be something fun, you know, to let them know that they're important, to let them know that they matter. And that's probably the third thing, and the thing that I learned more than any other thing on the streets, that we are not anything that we see, or that we earn, or that we deserve. We are who we are inside. And there is a basic equality. The way that you treat a brother or sister is the way that you want to be treated. And I think it has nothing to do with money, or hunger, or owning things. It has to do with seeing into the heart of somebody. And there's goodness there. If you don't look for it, you'll never find it. But if you look, you'll see it. One of the most poignant memories I have of being on the street is I was with a group one night, and they were teenage boys, and they happened to be black boys, and I was here from this lovely suburb, and I was supposed to fear these kids in case they were gangs and they were going to mug me or something. And they just looked cold to me. These kids were freezing. And this one boy had a ski jacket. It was beautiful, but it wasn't zippered up, and he didn't have the hood on, and he was obviously freezing to death. And I don't know what possessed me, but I ran over and zipped him up, right? Because, I mean, first I'm a mother, right? Then I'm homeless. And I said, you're never going to stay warm. You're going to freeze. You will literally freeze. You've got this fine coat, and you don't even button it and buckle it and all this kind of thing. And he said, I didn't because my hands were too cold. His hands were in his pockets. And I'm like, oh, that'll never do. What are you going to do? You know, you'll never make it through the winter as a homeless child. And I was crossing Adelaide, and I was walking across the street, and he hollered out, and he said, hey, lady. And I turned, and he said, are you an angel? And I said, yeah, I am. And I thought, that kind of thing happens on the streets all the time, where you wouldn't have your stereotypes or your fears come first. You would just act, because it's the right thing to do. But we could do that here, even though we have homes.
Yes, it's not the Horn of Africa. Yes, it's not the Horn of Africa. But something that Emily said is there's many things that Emily said that struck me. Is that Geneva Convention or no Geneva Convention, nobody should have to live on the street, especially in a place like the Greater Toronto Area, where most people who live on the street do so in the shadows of the biggest banks in the country. And when you drive, from Yonge Street to Bay Street, if you are in the Bay and Queen or Bay and King area, you look at how many homeless people are finding shelters inside ATM, enclaves, right? And that is a real shame. It's not that it's not that people are doing without. It's that people are doing without in an environment where enough people have enough money to ensure that everybody's taken care of. Now, I've been asked for 3 pointers. I actually have 4, so sue me. The first thing that needs to happen is, the first thing I would advise everybody to do is have a genuinely good opinion of every single person you see in need. Life is rough. Everybody has a story. Every single person who's suffering every single person who's living is fighting a hard battle, regardless of whether he's well off or not. Life is rough. Everybody's suffering, right? Cut people some slack and have a good opinion of people. Just because somebody has a substance abuse issue doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't need food or shelter. Second point, smile genuinely at people and acknowledge their existence. Especially when you pass them on the street, make it a point, make it a mental note to stop, acknowledge them, smile to them, have a conversation. Lord knows they're not in need of our pity. And Emily will attest to this. Being homeless is a very powerful experience. It's a very empowering experience because you can't threaten a man who has nothing to lose, right? What do you threaten him with? Jail time? Great, he has a roof over his head, right? You can't threaten a man who has nothing to lose. It's a very empowering experience. In fact, it is us who are in need of showing mercy to them because, we are the needy ones. We need to show mercy to them so that Allah will show mercy to us. Right? It is us who need to demonstrate that mercy. We are the needy ones in this transaction. Third thing, give. Please give. Even a little helps. I know somebody who makes it a point to empty all the change out of their wallet every single time they pass by, anybody homeless that they see. Just give away all your change, right? Give to your food banks. The Mississauga food bank, you can buy a can of food and donate it to them. You can buy $1, you can spend $1 to buy a can of food and donate it to the Mississauga food bank. Or you can give them $1, which allows them to distribute $7.50 worth of food. So every $1 you give to the Mississauga food bank allows them to distribute $7.50 worth of food. I mean, one of the things about giving that we have to keep in mind is the person that we see who is needy, his risk, his sustenance is destined by God. The question is whether I will have the honor in becoming a channel through which he will get it or not. Because if you want, somebody else will have that honor, right? I would want that. I would want to be a part of that. And the last thing is to understand, to learn how to spot people who are in need. Become more aware of who is around you, who you're sharing a room with, who you're sharing a neighborhood with, who you're sharing a bus with, right? Understand, understand what it is, what people like this, people who are in need are going through, so that you can understand to spot them, and so you'll know what to do when you spot them. If you want to know how to spot them, we can have a conversation about that. But yeah, please, that's it.
Okay, we are going to close, but I just wanted to share something very small because I can't contain it. When I first came here, I hated it. And
Mississauga or Canada?
Both. I'm really sorry. I hated suburbia even more because I was used to an environment where everybody lives on top of everybody else, because Britain has the population of the entire Canada. Twice the population of the entire of Canada and the landmass of Ontario. So because everybody lived on top of everybody else, I would get from my front door to my driveway to the car and would have said salams to about 5 different people. And here, I would get from my driveway to somebody else's house after a 40-minute drive and not have spoken to anyone and not have seen anybody on the streets. And, it was horrible. So, as a purely selfish thing, when I moved into the house here, I wrote little cards of introduction to my neighbours. And I told them who I was, and I gave them my name, and I told them who my husband was, and gave them literally my little bio. And I posted it in their post boxes. Purely selfish. What it did though, is it made it so much easier for my neighbours to come and speak to me. And all of a sudden, I had a community, and I had people who knocked on my door and said, "Do you need anything? Can I help?" But then now there are people who we take food to because we met them and we made it easy for them to speak to us. Because people aren't going to tell you that they're in need. Your neighbours aren't going to tell you that they're in need. So it was a purely selfish act, and it wasn't being nice to me. I just want people to talk to me. And they did. But in them talking to me, I was able to find out about my neighbours. And when we're talking 40 houses in directions, we're not talking north, south, east and west. We're talking 360 degrees worth of 40 houses. That's a lot of neighbourhood to cover. And so write a letter of introduction, literally just a little card, and do it selfishly, because people come talk to you. And our neighbour mows our lawn now. So you never know what you'll get out of it. Okay, Jazakallah khairan, we're going to close with a dua. I'm going to pass it over to Habib, and he can do the dua.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. If Sheikh Farad was here, he would make a lengthy dua. If Sheikh Farad was here, he would make a lengthy dua in English, in which he would masterfully capture every single emotion, every single thought that we're feeling here. Whichever city he is in right now on his travels, make a Fatiha that, inshallah, that Allah bless his journey and that he return him back to us safely.
Fab.
And in the spirit of emptying all your change out, the Mississauga Food Bank donation box is at the front desk.
It says feed me.
It says feed me.
Oh.
Nobody should leave here with any change in their pocket. At all. I'm checking. I'm at the door.
Sorry, really quickly, just a really quick announcement. Seekers Works is launching 3 really exciting initiatives for 2012. First is the Feed Me 2012 Hunger Campaign, in which we are seeking to raise $10,000 for the Mississauga Food Bank, which means they will be able to distribute $75,000 worth of food in Mississauga this year, inshallah. And we are also, the second project that we're doing is we're doing something called 30 food banks in 30 days, which Jessica is heading up, and she's going to be, inshallah, profiling food banks in the GTA. The third thing that we're doing is something for which Sheikh Faraz made me a guinea pig. We are crowdsourcing for the production of the next 2 albums that I'll be putting out. And the idea is to collect all the production funds. So we're looking to raise about $15,000. The idea is to collect all the production funds, produce 2 albums, put them out for international sales, and every single penny that comes in through the sales of those albums will be going to 2 charitable causes for Canadian sales. The first one is something called charitywater.org. You can look it up. It's an award-winning charity. It's won awards for its governance. Also, like 100% of the funds that they receive goes towards providing clean water resources all over the world. And they have a whole list of prioritized regions and stuff like that. So it's charitywater.org. That's where half the funds for Canadian sales will be going. The other half in Canada will be going to the Mississauga Food Bank. If you're looking to take an active participation in this really awesome Sadaqah Jariyah type project, we can talk about that after, inshallah. So I mean, the idea is that every single CD that is sold, the money for that will be going towards these 2 projects, and in perpetuity, because every single time it's reissued, the same thing will follow. I would like to thank the panelists for coming out. Emily, for coming here the second time. Thank you very much. We really benefited from your presence and from your words. And be sure to catch the video. Okay, it's called Spaces and Places, Poverty in Peel. So look it up. You can even download it. If you, no, it's not on our YouTube channel. We have a link to it from one of our videos. But it's not on our, but it's called Spaces and Places. You just Google it, Spaces and Places, Poverty in Peel, and you'll see it. And Sawitri, thank you very much for coming down, sharing your video with us. Well, somebody else's video, but you were in it. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and your time. And of course, the good doctor, thank you very much for heading up the panel. And thank you all for coming. This was meant to start a conversation about poverty in Peel, in the GTA. I won't take too much of your time. It's just that when we live in suburbia, it's a very insular existence. One of the people who invited me out for a concert in Boston, I had asked to visit their local food bank. They had no idea what a food bank was, and this guy was an MIT graduate. Right? So we need to become more aware of the things around us and take an active role. So thank you very much for coming, and let's keep the conversation going. So what's this? Oh, a lot of new faces here. Please add yourself up to the email list, please. And if you would like to get involved in the 3 initiatives I mentioned, please talk to me. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.